Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And again, as I said in my opening statement, sometimes these are difficult conversations, and I certainly, in response to the comment by Mrs. Powell, do not presume that all parents are at risk to their students, and none of us do. We all agree that parental engagement is an important thing, but that's not the issue here. If students are not talking to their parents about their gender identity, maybe there's a good reason for that. There's nothing that prohibits teachers from talking to the student about the importance of talking to their parents. But sometimes students are afraid to do that because as I said, there's a lot of homeless youth who are LGBTQ and they get kicked out of their house when they reveal their gender identity. And I want to say, the parental engagement, as I said, that's a key to student success, but if we want to protect student privacy and parental rights, we should talk about dismantling the Department of Education and the problems with that. We should talk about the 6 new illegal and unconstitutional interagency agreements to move major education programs to different agencies and how that will make it more difficult for the federal government to enforce FERPA and PERPA. It's going to be a nightmare for accountability. The Department of Agency's new interagency agreements fragment responsibility for student data. Spreading those programs across multiple agencies is going to blur who's accountable for interpreting and enforcing FERPA and PERPA in a consistent way. It increases the risk of data sprawl, and as Mr. Eviscerates said, we need to update these laws. Not weaken them, and with the weakened department or non-existent department, what's going to happen with guidance, technical assistance, and oversight in an increasingly more complex data world? And despite the outcry for stronger parental rights, the majority is still supporting actions that are going to make it harder for parents and students to rely on FERPA and PERPA, and will leave data more exposed rather than protected. So Mr. Eviscerates, we were talking before the committee started about, maybe there's some ways we can update FERPA and PERPA and find that common ground. What do you think about the effect of moving all of this to other agencies that lack the staff experience and expertise to address these issues? What's that going to mean?
Thank you for the question. Dissolving the Department of Education is going to raise serious obstacles to enforcement and updating FERPA to keep pace with modern technological challenges. The Department of Education Inspector General issued a report some number of years ago highlighting that FERPA enforcement was lagging. Complaints were not being resolved in a reasonable time. Schools were not being provided guidance to address harms that were being done to student privacy, and that has largely not been resolved. And by dissolving the Department of Education and dispersing those enforcement and rulemaking efforts elsewhere throughout the government, it could critically harm an area that is already under-regulated and under-enforced. And so there's a huge jeopardy to students if this occurs. Moreover, FERPA and the PPRA, the 2 statutes we're touching on today, they are premised on receiving funds from the Department of Education.
Right.
If those critical grants are dispersed elsewhere throughout the federal government, FERPA and PPRA become worth no more than the paper they're printed on.
Thank you very much. I have another question briefly. Filer versus Doe, the United States Supreme Court held that students in this country have the right to public education, even if they're undocumented. And I want to point out that immigration raids at or near schools, that's been restricted for about 30 years across administrations, but earlier this year, the Trump administration rescinded the sensitive location policy, and recently schools have become scenes of aggressive immigration enforcement activity. Students and their families are increasingly concerned for the safety on the way to school or in school. Student absences are increasing. Immigrant student enrollment is decreasing, and I hope every member on this committee would agree that children should feel safe in schools. Mr. Eviscerates, are you aware of any school district or state agency that's receiving requests from federal immigration authorities, and how would this type of data be handled? Would FERPA be interpreted in these situations to protect student data?
Thank you for the question, Ranking Member. Although immigration authorities continue to disclaim any intent to enforce immigration laws within schools, we have seen at least one reported incident where ICE did request information on a former student, which remains subject to FERPA, for purposes of immigration enforcement. And FERPA emphatically protects the data of students regardless of their immigration status. Moreover, and critically, FERPA does not have a general exception that says thou mayest disclose student data to any governmental agency. Instead, it has 18 exceptions articulated in the regulations and in the statute, And those are all permissive. Nowhere do they require disclosure, except, of course, to parents or eligible students.
I appreciate that. And I just want to emphasize this is a pretty serious issue in the district I represent. We have ICE stalking students in parking lots. We had ICE agents point loaded guns at students off campus, but at a coffee shop, but high school students. And this is not just affecting undocumented students. This is affecting Latino students, students of color, and it's a really serious concern for our communities. And I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Miller of Illinois is recognized.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Kiley, for hosting